What's up guys, here are the best IEM builds for 2025 at 8 different price brackets including DACs, amps, and EQ. A rule of thumb when it comes to DACs and tips is that we want to prioritize spending the most on our IEMs itself. For example, at around $30, we want our DAC to be around $10, which is around the same price as the Apple dongle, USB-C, or Lightning. These are a fantastic choice. They perform as good as, $50, $80, even $100 dedicated DACs. So we want to just use these moving forward when it comes to cheaper IEMs. As for the amp, you can really find a really good one for around $10 or so, and we want to keep the whole budget within $30. So our IEM is going to cost around $20, and then our source, which is just a DAC, is going to be $10. A good option here would be the Warner 2, mainly because it comes with 3 Senkai tips, which alone are around $15, so that's like half of our budget already, and we can't really buy tips alone at $30 because they do cost a lot. So the Warner 2 gives us a very good tip with the Senkai tips, as well as a pretty solid cable for around $30. Another great option here would be the Tangent Bunny or the Zero Ultima DSP 3.5 because they have one of the smoothest treble at this price range, very detailed for the price as well. And you also have the EQ options on the app if you do get the DSP version, which gives you a lot of variety. Those two are my two main options because they give you the most value for the amount that you're paying. The Warner 2 with the accessories, and then the Bunny with the smooth treble response, the detail, and the EQ option as well. Now, this doesn't mean there aren't other options. You can still go for the EW100P for something more vocal centric. The Chu 2 is good as well if you want something that is a little bit bassier but still all rounded. And then you got the 02s, the QKZ HBBs for a more bassy listen. Basically, all of the sets under $20 are going to be fine. It's just that the Warner 2 and the Bunnies pushes them a little bit above the others because of the extra value that they offer. Now, if you're looking to EQ, I would recommend the Tangent Bunny or the Zero Ultima DSP or 3.5, it doesn't matter, because they have the smoothest treble response, less peakiness, and just easier to EQ overall. Then lastly, if you want more variety and you don't want to EQ, so you want multiple IEMs at this price range, and you're okay with sacrificing some of the smoothness and the accessories from the Warner 2 and the Bunnies or the Zero Ultimas, then you can go look at some of the KZ and the CCA IEMs because they often go on sale for around $5, and with a $20 budget you can roughly get around 3 to 4 of them depending on which unit that you're choosing. For example, you have the KZ Dawn Pros, the Gales, the EDC Pros. Those are all solid options for the price that they're asking for. Now, moving up to $50, the recommended source here would still be the Apple dongle, mainly because it is the best value when it comes to pure DAC performance. Again, you can't really find a very good amp for around like $10 at this price range because we do want to use the rest of the funds for the IEM. So here we have $10 for the DAC and then $40 for something that is slightly better than the $20 IEMs. Now, some options here would be the Confined Clean if you want something that is slightly warm leaning but a good and smooth all-rounder, very refined treble for the price. You got the Condensa from Kiwi Ears if you want a more dynamic, engaging and bassy all-rounder playback. You got the Singbot EW200 for something brighter, more detailed, probably the most technical out of all the IEMs under this price range. And then you got the Sonus for a more clean, balanced kind of sound as well. Then when it comes to EQ, I would go for the 7Hz Alua Ultra because again, it is pretty smooth in the price range, and also you have an extra driver working for the treble, which does help with when it comes to EQing. Then as for some combos at around $40, we basically take the IEMs from the previous price range and then we mix and match them. For example, a combination would be the Warner 2 plus the QKZ HBBs. You get a balanced, slightly vocal emphasis set with the Warner 2, and then you get a more bassy and warm sound with the QKZ HBB. So a good contrast between the two of them, but also you get the Senkai tips with the Warner 2s and the nice cable as well. And if you want more variety, I would still go with the Warner 2s because it just gives you the most value since we don't have that much funds when it comes to the tips. So the Warner 2 already gives us the Senkai tips, which is a good bonus. So you would go for the Warner 2 and then you would go for multiple CCA or KZ sets. A lot of variety, mix and match them to your preference sound and your library. Moving on, at the $80 price range, I would still personally stick with a $10 budget when it comes to the DACs, which means this is still the Apple dongle. I personally don't find an amp really to be worth it at this price range. Again, you can't really find a super good one for around like $20 or $30, and that also cuts your IEM fund by a lot, which pretty much means you stay the same as the previous price range with around $40. But if you do use the Apple dongle, this gives you $70 worth of IEMs that you can buy. Some good options here would be the EW300 if you want an all-rounder set that is bassy but still pretty technical when it comes to the treble performance. And then you also got the Tangent for you if you want a more neutral, balanced, more reference sound. Or if you want some planars, you got the RDT10s, you got the nice hack F1 Pros here as well. And as for a more exciting kind of listen, you got the Quinier Zero Bluetooth with the ohm adapter as well, which turns it into a pretty fun bass head listen. And then when it comes to EQ, I would go with the KZ Zenith because it is pretty smooth given that it is only one DD, and the DD is also an improvement, an upgrade you can say. But overall, the FR is just very smooth, which makes it very easy to EQ. Some good combos here would be the SIMGA EW200 with the Tangzu 1R2s, mainly because the 1R2s do come with the Senkai tips, and that does make the EW200 a lot smoother, but still gives you that detail and technical performance that it's known for. Another good option here would be the Tangzu Yushenji for something that is airy, but still, clean, slightly bright leaning, a very unique kind of listen at its price. And you also have the Kiwiers Cadenza, which kind of fills in that, all-rounder and bassy aspect that the Yushenji lacks. Then lastly, you can also try the Confined Clean with the Tangent Bunny or the Zero Ultima DSPs. These two also complement and contrast each other nicely. The Clean is a warmer, bassier all-rounder set, whereas the Bunny or the Zero Ultimas are more of a reference and clean sound, gives you a good variety with the EQ that it provides on top. Moving on, at around $150, we can now finally bump our budget for our DAC and our tips by a little bit more. We now have $30 instead of $10, and within that $30, I will still get the Apple dongle because even with $30, you're not gonna beat the Apple dongle, so you might as well just get the Apple dongle and then use the remaining $20 on tips, because the tips do make a bigger difference when it comes to changing the sound versus like an amp or a DAC at this price range. Which means for IEMs, we now have a whopping $120, which does give us a lot of variety. For example, if you want a good reference all-rounder, very technical, very good value, you can go for the Super Mix 4 or the Truth Theory Nova. Both are classics in their own right. Then if you want something a little bit brighter but still a very technical and well-rounded set, you got the EM6L, you got the EA500LM. Both are very technical for the price, very good value, slightly less value than the Super Mix 4, which is why the Super Mix 4 is more expensive. But these two will give you more range to play around with, just a combo with the other IEMs. You also got the Defiant here if you want a more exciting all-rounder listen, slightly V-shaped, good sub-bass extension. Only place I would watch out for is that the QC is not that good, so a heads up there. And then you also got the Fission, which is a slightly better version of the Tangent for You, still a neutral reference, very smooth kind of set. Basically the origin for half the price using the same driver and basically the same tuning. Then if you want a warmer but still all-rounded and smooth set, you got the Kiwiers Aroso. You also got the Full Magic 1 and the Tangent Nora if you want a warmer set that's better for male vocals, for vocals in general, less all-rounder and more vocal-centric. And then you also got the Explorer if you want a more scaling, darker, bassier set. Then as for EQ, I would go for the SIMGA EM6L because these are the smoothest that you can find. Very good for EQing and just a very smooth playback. A little bit bright stock, but with EQ, these are a pretty solid pick. Now, as for some combos, again, we're gonna take some IEMs from the previous price bracket and we're gonna mix and match them. For example, if you want a good contrast to your library, I would go for something like the Tangent for You, which is more clean, smooth, neutral, slightly warm depending on the switch, with the Kiwiers Etude, because the Etude is a lot different in the low end. It's like more bassy, it's more reverby, more bouncy in the overall playback, gives you a good variety there. You can also go for the SIMGA EA500LM for something brighter, more technical, very good for the value for around like $80 on sale. And then you buy the 1R2 for a cleaner, more reference sound, but you get the Senkai tips and you put the Senkai tips on the LM, makes it smoother, makes it more refined. And with the remaining amount, you can also get the Confined Clean for something that is warmer, bassy, all-rounder. Then lastly, if you want to try different driver types, I would go for the SIMGA EW300 and then get the RDT10, which is a planar and very technical for the price as well. This way you get a bassy all-rounder sound to a warmer sound depending on the nozzle, and then you get the RDT10s, which is a more like all-rounder to a brighter leaning sound. Next, moving up to the $250 price bracket, I'm gonna keep the sources and the tip amount the same at $30 because, again, not a huge difference when it comes to the amp, and Apple dongle is still a banger for the amount that you're paying for. And we're gonna use the rest of the amount, which is $220 on the IEM. Some options here would be the original Z-God Odysseys. It's mine and many people's favorite at this price range for a reason. It's contrasty, it's dynamic, it's fun, the bass texture is great, the impact, and then you also get the bite and the scaling as well. But if you want something that is cleaner, airier, brighter leaning, you can check out the Electric Condenser 4. You can get these for around $200 on sale. A very refined treble playback for the price. And then you also get the OG C Audio UMAs if you want a more vocal centric set. These are still probably my benchmark for a vocal playback IEM at this price range. It's just very good. You also got the Cranier Daybreaks and the EPZ P50s if you want a more reference, neutral all-rounder kind of set. Very smooth as well, but just not as bright as the Condenser 4. Less technical, you can say. You also got some good options here when it comes to planars. If you want a more dynamic, lively, and bassy sound, that would be the S12 Ultra. If you want the smoothest and most natural planar playback in the timbre, that would be the Timeless 2. And if you want something more exciting, sharper, brighter, livelier in the playback, that would be the SimGot ET142. Then as for scaling, you got the Z-God Lush for a smooth, clean and more neutral balanced playback compared to the Explorer. It's going to be a little bit more technical, but still scales very well. Then you got the Arcadias if you want a more heavy, thick, almost bass head kind of level sound if you crank them up and on. Then EQ wise, I would go for the Electric Condenser 4 because it is very smooth, but you just get better drivers compared to the EM6L. Now when it comes to just pure value, the EM6L is still going to be better. It's like half the price, but if you're talking about like the best for EQ, the Cat 4 is slightly better. As for some combos, we have around $220 to play around with. So for example, I would go with something like the Super Mix 4 or the Nova for a balanced kind of sound, and then get something that is more unique like the Full Explorer, for example, that scales very good, but it's also very bassy. Those two are gonna put you at around $220 when they go on sale. You can also go for the EM6L because it is the smoothest, you can EQ it, but also the technicalities are very good. It's very good for vocals, female vocals to be specific, and then go for the Hydros for a more bassy, more impactful all-rounder, bassy all-rounder kind of sound, but you get the tuning switches on the Hydros as well. Then lastly, if you don't mind flipping for the QC, you can go for the Juicier Defiant if you want something that is, more fun. Got that sub bass, you get the extension in the treble, slight V-shape kind of sound, and then you get the tangent fission on top to kind of balance it out because the fission is a more clean, neutral, and reference sound. Moving on, at around $350, we can now finally upgrade our trusty old Apple dongle into something that is a little bit better, and with the new budget, we now have $70 when it comes to the DAC, the amp, and the tips. Now, my source of choice would be the new Moondrop Dawn Pro 2, not only because it is a DAC and an amp, but also the chipset that they are using is probably one of the best at its price range, and also it's very portable, and the overall aesthetic is also very nice. And since you can get the Dawn Pro 2s on sale for around $50, this gives us $20 left to buy tips, which is very nice. You can get the Venus Velvet, you can get the Clarions, you can get the Final Ease, you can get these spin fits, a lot of options here, and this does leave us a whopping $280 left for our IEMs. Now, an option here if you want an all-rounder that is fun, dynamic, it's contrasty, it's got good sub bass and very technical as well, these would be the QE's Astros. You can find these for around $260 on sale, a very solid all-rounder set. But if you want something that is a little bit more unique than the Astros but still pretty similar, it's a little bit warmer now, you get a little bit more sparkliness in the treble, still pretty technical for the price, these would be the Crescent, a more unique take on the meta overall tuning, and you can get these for around $250 on sale. You also got the Sophie's Volume S if you want a male vocal centric set. It's smoother, it's more balanced, more reference, less dynamic, but you still get the thickness, you get the energy in the male vocals, and you also get the impedance adapter switch as well, and you can get these for around $280 on sale. Then lastly, you can also try the QBR Septet if you want something that is more treble heavy, more bright leaning, sparkly, airy, but you still get the no weight, you get the naturalness in the low end as well. As for EQ, these would be the Z-God Australis because they have the highest quality drivers when it comes to the treble. It is using a Sony E50 Hummingbird for the BAs, and the frequency response is also pretty smooth given the price, but I get it, it is my collab, so if you don't want to trust me, you can still get the Condenser 4 or the EM6L. Then lastly, as for some combos, we are taking the Condenser 4 from the previous price bracket and we are mixing it with the EW300 because the Cat 4 is a bright leaning, airy, you know, like sweet vocal set, and then the UW300 is more bassy and more all-rounded that fills in the missing hole the Cat 4 is leaving. Moving on, at around $450, we're gonna use the same budget, which is $70 for our source and our tips, because again, going from $60 on the Dawn Pro 2 to something more expensive, like around 100, is not going to be a huge difference. Rather save that money on the IEM itself, which means we have $380 to use our IEMs. And if you're looking for something that is a good all-rounder set but pretty bassy, you got the Hype 4s, you got the T Pros. If you're looking for something that is a bit warmer, more airy, more dreamlike, more unique in the sound, you got the Ziga Lunas for that. And if you want the most, you know, technical, slightly bright leaning sound, best bang for your buck when it comes to performance, that would be the Zigat Horizons. There are good options here for bass heads as well. For example, the Punch Audio Martellos is very good at around $300 on sale. The HBB Punch is around like $380 to $400 on sale, which is like a smoother version of the Martellos. And then if you want a clean, neutral scaling set, you got the Canon Pros, you got the Chue. And then lastly, if you want a, you know, vocal centric set, something that is more unique in the vocal playback, my personal favorite vocal set, like under $500, that would be the Zigat Arcanus. As for EQ, these would be the The Audio Hype 4s because they have the best drivers with the Sonians for the treble, and then you get the isobaric DD as well. So a slight improvement over the Estrellas in terms of EQ. As for some combos here, we got the OG Zigat Odysseys for a contrasty, dynamic, fun, bassy sound, and then you have the Cranier Daybreaks or the Supermix 4 to kind of balance it out with a more reference and all-rounder listen. Then as for the total opposite end of the spectrum, you got the Lecture Cadenza 4 for something brighter leaning, airy, sweet, very clean, and then you got the HBB Arcadias for something that is dark, thick, heavy, and very bassy, complements each other very well. Then finally, if you want to try different drivers, I would go for the 7Hz Helmets 2 for a more smooth and planar listen, and then get the EA 500 LM for a, you know, dynamic driver that is bright leaning, very technical, and then finally a single BA, a full Magic 1 for something that is warmer and vocal centric. Moving up at around $650, we can now finally upgrade our budget for our source and tips, and now we boost it up to $150, which is double the amount, so that is very nice. For our sources, we actually have a good amount of options here. For example, I would personally recommend the Quarterlex 5K or the Feel BTR15 if you're looking for something that is more portable, more compact, but still very good when it comes to features. You get EQ, you get Bluetooth, the performance, the low distortion, all very good, all very class leading, price leading, and they are classics for a reason. But if you're not on the go, you don't need the EQ or the Bluetooth, then I would recommend checking out the Hartfield R1. The Hartfield R1 is actually very underrated. Like, the amount of output these can put out for the price and the size is pretty nuts, but it is, I guess you can say, more analog in the overall presentation, not as clean and referencey. And then as for some dApps, so if you want a screen, if you want like a, you know, app kind of thing going on, I would recommend checking out the new Hydus 880 Pro Max. These are like low-key a banger. I've been using these for the last like 3 weeks. Very convenient, very small. The build quality is very good. The output is also fantastic, and overall it's just a very solid product for the price. No real complaints there. Now, sources aside, this does give us a whopping $500 left to spend on our IEMs. A lot of the benchmarks at this price often go on sale for around $500, like the Top Pros if you want something that is very technical, clean, slightly bright leaning. You got the Rockies for a very well implemented treble, like almost endgame like treble level, very smooth, you know, bright leaning, very detailed. You got the Tangzu Shenwu Gate for a more neutral playback, very straight line in the overall, you know, just approach. You get a lot of tips with the Shenwu Gate as well. And then the Mega 5 ESC is a good all-rounder. The Volaire is a good all-rounder. You got the OG Oracles for a very good vocal clean set, also good all-rounder. And then you got the Symphonian Meteors for something that is more warm, more bassy, very good when it comes to rock, you know, hip-hop. There's a very meaty IEM. But of course, we can't forget about the OG, the Legend, the Moondrop variations. These are the smoothest when it comes to the FR, the treble presentation, the refinement out of all of the IEMs I've listed. They are a EQ IEM for a reason because they are very good for EQ. Stock wise, I would probably avoid these, but if you're gonna use it for EQ, get the variations. Now, as for some combos, if you want the best value, I would go for the Z-God Horizon because it is a very technical set, treble leaning, just very good dynamics, very lively, and then you mix that in with the OG Odyssey, which is also a very good value set when it comes to the bass, the scaling, the dynamics, the overall, fun factor to the sound. These two combined is going to give you a very good time. Another option here would be the volume mesh for a vocal set with something that is more bass centric, like the Hype 4, the T-Pros, the Australis, and that gives it a good combination of having something that is smoother but something more dynamic and bassy. Then as for something bass heavy, I would go for the Punch Audio Martello mixed in with an all-rounder that is slightly different, like the Condenser 4 that's more clean, more airy, more sweet. Then finally at the $1,300 mark, we have finally reached quote-unquote endgame, and here we are actually upgrading our source budget again. We are now boosting it up to $300, which gives us a good amount of room to play with. Some good options when it comes to sources would be the Kudalex C7 and the FIO BTR17. These are basically the slightly upgraded version of the 5K and the BTR15. Not a drastic difference, like value wise those two are going to be better, but if you want quote unquote the best, these two are slightly better. Then as for something less portable, more stationary, something you can use at home, at your desktop, you can now get the topping E30 and L30 combo or the shit Marty and Mani combo. These two are going to be like pretty overkill when it comes to the output because they have a lot of output and they're also pretty low in the distortion. Pretty good products overall. Again, they're classics. These will be more than enough to drive your IEMs. Then lastly, as for some DAPs, you can find these for under $300 on sale. You got the Hybe R4s, you got the Shinlean M3 Plus, and then you got the FIO M21s, all very solid. These are going to be slightly more feature packed than the A80 Pro Max. The screen is going to be a little bit bigger, slightly easier to use, just scrolling wise, and then the battery life is going to be slightly better. Also, the drivability, the power output, going to be slightly better than the Hydus. Now, do you necessarily need this much power? In my opinion, not really, because I haven't ran into much of an issue, driving my Monarchs, my Symphonium stuff. So unless you really need that drivability, you really need that power, I would actually just stick with the Hydus A80 Pro Max because in terms of value, it's like half the price of these. The only reason that I can see someone buying this is for the amplifying power, but unless you're going to the desktop route, it's not a huge difference. Now, I can see people buying the topping and the shit combos for the output, on the amp because it does make a slight difference when you compare it to the cheaper, the Hydus, the portable DAC amps, the DAPs. But if you're comparing it between a smaller portable DAC amp to a slightly bigger portable DAC amp or like a DAP, it's not a huge difference. Yeah, the amp might be slightly better, but in terms of value, I would actually just stick with the Kudalex 5K, the FIO BTR15, even the cheaper DAC stuff like the R1s. Those value-wise would be much better. So in that sense, I would personally save my money towards just spending that on the IEM. But I get it, if you want a bigger screen, if you want a slightly fancy features, it is your money, go for it. But I just think for most people, I would stick with the Hydus A80 Pro Max. Now, sources aside, this does mean we have a $1,000 budget for IEMs, which is amazing because this means we can get a lot of endgame stuff like the Monarch Mark 4s for an all-rounder set that is very smooth. You can get the Monarch Mark 2s as well if you want something that's more vocal-centric, more mid-centric. You can get the Lecture Mystic 8 for something that is cleaner, more brighter, more neutral. You got the Mess Mark II for more OCD, more treble, heavy, emphasize. You got the Theaudio Origin if you want something that is very good when it comes to the bass, the reverb, the bounciness, the texture. Probably endgame level when it comes to that. And then you also got the Symphonium Helios for probably the best treble presentation at its price. So a lot of options, and you can also stretch your budget just a little bit more, like $500 more, to get the Symphonium Crimson for a more slightly V-shaped, more detailed, sharper, contrasty kind of sound. You can get the Duno Glacier if you want that dynamic all-rounder with a slight pop in the vocals. You can get the Dawn X if you want a more laid back, smooth, slightly warm kind of playback. As for some combos, we are taking the $500 IEMs and we're gonna mix and match them. For example, if you want something that is very different in the sound, you have the Top Pros for a cleaner, sparkly, very technical playback versus the Symphony meters, which are a lot heavier, more warm, more dreamy-like, more airy in the presentation. Then if you're looking for a more complementary set, you can get something that is an all-rounder like the Volaire, the Oracle Mark 1s, the Mark 3s, the Omega 5 ESTs, and then you combine that with the Z-Guide Arcanus for a more vocal-centric playback, more unique in the sound. And then lastly, if you want the most variety, you can go for the Nice-Hack Rockies for the treble, the sparkliness, the smoothness, the detail, and then you get the Punched Audio Martellos for like a bass head listen, very exciting, and you round that off with a smoother and more vocal-centric set like the original C-Audio Yumeis or the EPZ P50s or the Daybreaks. Now, as for EQ, these would be the Moondrop Variations or the Monarch Mark 4s. These two are very close when it comes to the treble response. The Monarchs are slightly better when it comes to the overall build. You get a little bit, slightly better drivers inside, but it's not a huge difference. And the overall accessories on packaging is going to be better on the Monarch Mark 4s. The only main downside is that it's twice the amount of the variations, and if you're gonna EQ it, it's not gonna be a huge difference when it comes to the overall sound. So when it comes to value, I would still go for the variations, and then I don't know, save the rest of your money, buy tips, or just use it outside, get some food with your friends or something. I don't know. But that aside, I hope this video is helpful. My throat is completely dead. Let me know down below which ones you would recommend at each price range. But aside from that, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see everyone in the next one.
Shout out to Dom Q, Rox Cat, BURAC, Discal Scaldus, Walker Standard, Patrick, User, Contain Quaba Juice Gains, Mr. Gorillas, Polly J, Giseng Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Wizard, Obi, Triple Extended, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapis Art, Chaco Norris, Shempakale, FKSRG, Cousin Fat Fat, Julius Phillip, Dead Riddle, Belha, Ardmore, Nico, Parham, Addy, Michael, Trackstar LL here, Sharjip, Ryan, Shuri, Raphael, I'm J-Rack, Ori, June, Hakase, Efinadim, EGC, Raj, Chimika, Javier, CB952, Gelbog, Sanadan, AK131, Brian Carson, Emin Gelato, Sunfire, Ninja Wick, Joey Chi, Mr. Combat, Robotic Sister, Vitor, Kenj, Porn Podge, and Varaya. Thank you guys so much for the support.